One of the things we've all got to think about individually, as well as in our businesses and in the sector, is about planning for later life and the choices and options that we want.
I'm really delighted to say we've got Jane Ashcroft, CBE, who's the CEO of ANCO, who are the UK's largest not-for-profit provider of housing and care for older people in the UK. She's one of the most respected, high-profile, authoritative voices in the sector. So it's a great pleasure to get some of your views and have to spend some time with you, Jane. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. That's a very kind introduction.
I think 2021's been a pretty tough year around for lots of different reasons, but what's been the challenges for you and maybe some of the highlights?
I suppose the challenge is the kind of keeping going. 2020 was the big surprise, kind of dealing with the impact of COVID, and that's been sort of quite well reflected on, and I'm sure we'll continue to be reflecting on this for many years. Actually, the kind of reality of 21 is, okay, so this keeps going then. Clearly, the world is not going back to how it used to be. What does that really mean? And I think, my reflections are, isn't it amazing what organisations and individuals can cope with by way of change? And I don't at all underestimate the impact for people, whether that impact is personal loss, whether that impact is the impact for people working in the sector, those of us who've been working from home, that's a bit different to working in a care home. Everybody's had to deal with a lot of change. And on the whole, I think businesses have shown resilience. I think individuals have shown resilience. And while we must look out for the well-being of those who aren't resilient, and we all have our bad days, we do need to acknowledge the achievement of getting through. Recognising the need for good quality care is something I think that has come out of the last 18 months or so.
And do you think that people are more or less concerned about going into a communal setting now? I mean, one of the things you talked about was trying to keep the homes on a personal setting, on a family setting, as opposed to a hospital feel because of COVID. Do you think you've been able to manage to do that? I
think the move towards a communal living, recognising the value of having people around, particularly good quality carers, all of those other ancillary services, so fabulous food and great activity. I mean, last Christmas, when I was locked down, and I managed to see my mum for a couple of hours on Christmas Day, like lots of other people. In our care homes, people were having a pretty good time. There were parties, there was activity, there was lots of meaningful things going on. Most of our care homes have a pub in them of some kind, a converted lounge or a particular purpose-built area. The pubs in Anchor's care homes were open when no other pubs were open. We're starting to break down some of those stereotypical, out-of-date, if they were ever right, views of what care homes are. Just people sitting around in a circle, watching something rubbish on the TV. I mean, one of the things we've all got to think about individually, as well as in our businesses and in the sector, is about planning for later life and the choices and options that we want. Care homes aren't really a positive choice that people make unless they have a need. I don't feel that I want to live in a care home in my later life. What I want is, if I need a care home, I want to know there's a brilliant care home available for me. Just because we've got more of an older population, the significant growth of the over 85 age group, there's not very many families that aren't having conversations about mum, dad, uncles, aunts. As a sector, we need to help those conversations to happen as well.
Do you see more interest in the retirement living provision ahead of care?
So of the 60,000 people who live with us, 6,000 of those people live in a residential care setting, and the vast majority of people live in retirement housing. I kind of think that proportion's about right, that the range of housing options will always have more people interested in them, because actually now care homes are, even residential care homes are predominantly for people living with a significant dementia impact in their lives and or end of life care. That's what care homes are for. This is an international issue about, we're all living longer, great news. How are we going to make sure that we have a good quality of life? And what does that mean for our housing supply and our housing stock and all of those? These things are all interconnected. So I mean, I love the fact that I can kind of move between the care sector and the housing sector in my role, because they feel completely interconnected to me.
Obviously, COVID has been the dialogue for everyone for the last 18 months. Do you think there's been any massive change in terms of design or things that we will do differently going forward as a result of COVID?
Care homes always dealt with infection control. We've always had norovirus and outbreaks of infection, and that stood us in good stead at the beginning of the pandemic. But yes, some of the issues, ventilation issues, the ability to access and egress homes from a wide number of points. So all the stuff about helping visitors in and out of homes without them having to move through too many communal areas. I mean, I think that is aligned with what a good quality environment is like for the resident. Residents need outdoor space and the ability to access outdoor space. So I think those things will start to become bedded in. One of the most difficult issues in running care services during the pandemic has been enabling families to be together. And we've seen through social media and other routes some of the concerns of families about government policy or care home policy around visits.
One of the changes that we've all been thinking about and seeing coming through is obviously the government's white papers and then the health and care levy. How do you think those two things are going to impact on the sector next year?
I described the sort of social care reform agenda as a jigsaw with lots of different component parts. The issue about the cap, in principle, a cap makes a lot of sense. The detail of how it works is the critical issue. And until we've got that detail, it's difficult for us as businesses to plan, and it's difficult for families to actually understand the impact. And the funding piece and the national insurance piece is just one part of the jigsaw. Actually, the fundamentals about social care reform are we haven't got enough social care. How are we going to have more? And we haven't got enough people working in social care. How are we going to have more? And people have changing expectations, and how are we going to meet those expectations? So we've kind of got a quarter of the picture in the jigsaw, I feel. My plea to anybody who'll listen is to make sure we've got the right people in the room for the conversations about the detail. So I think making sure the voice of providers is part of the detail of how we work things out needs to be our focus at the moment. Too often, the policymakers think that they have the voice of the provider if they've got local authorities in the room, because local authorities are seen as the social care sector.
Obviously, the cap is only on care costs as well, isn't it, rather than the accommodation costs, which is going to make quite a challenge, I think, for most people. It's still going to involve them having to sell the house in many circumstances, isn't it?
I can really understand why the government wants a clear and simple message. But the reason we haven't had a clear and simple message before is because there's a lot of things that sit together in how this all works. It is about the housing market. It is about house values and house prices in different parts of the country. It is about the benefits system and what people are entitled to. It is about private pensions. So it's probably not going to be possible to sum everything up in one little expression like 86 grand and you're home free kind of thing. Fine to have the framework, but let's get this detail sorted, because actually rational businesses making decisions about what to invest in, we have to have clarity about what the future funding is going to look like. The consistency of messaging now is quite clear. Everybody in the sector is talking about workforce, is talking about suitable levels of funding. So I think there is a consistency which perhaps there wasn't. Unlike clearly the NHS, there isn't one voice. There isn't a chief executive of social care like there was a chief executive of NHS England. But I think in reality, whether you look at the National Care Forum or Care England or any of the other representative bodies or any of the large providers, there is a very high degree of consistency of our messaging because the issues are the same for all of us.
You just touched on the biggest one. I mean, clearly it's the biggest cost in the whole sector is workforce, and obviously it's one of the largest challenges. How has that been for you, and what do you think of it going forward?
Early in COVID, the kind of general concern for the economy was we're going to have this period of unemployment and we're going to need jobs. And somehow That's not where we're at. We've got this real challenge with a lack, not just in our sector, but in many sectors of people available before you even start thinking about the right kind of skill sets to do the important work that we do. As hospitalities come back, as retails come back, as the market's more competitive, then this is a market. So it is about who's the best place, where's the best place to be, and we can't underestimate the fact that pay is part of that. We pride ourselves on being a great place to work. We have the benefit of being a national organisation. We've got a really strong training programme, got a fabulous apprenticeship scheme. We've got loads of case studies of people who are now in significant positions in the organisation who have been supported in their development. You can move around the country and still work for Anchor. So we're very lucky. We've got a lot going for us. At the end of the day, if you're getting a signing on bonus to go and work for Amazon, or you're getting paid £1 an hour more to go and work at Aldi, it isn't sensible to not consider that if you've got a family to feed. From the 1st of December 2021, we've become a living wage employer, living wage foundation, paying the true living wage. That is a really significant impact for any organisation, for a workforce of our size. And in doing that, we've also said we will maintain the differentials between roles, because we think it's really important that the extra responsibility that a team leader carries or a deputy manager carries is properly reflected. The challenging issue is how we manage the income to make sure that the money we're spending quite appropriately on good quality, well qualified, highly committed workforce. How do we find the other side of the equation? If we're going to continue with good quality services, if we're going to continue with the amount of supply and growing the supply, then we have to sort this issue about income. I don't want to be cared for by somebody on minimum wage who's just doing that job because they need a job. There aren't just more people out there that we've just got to convince this is a great sector. We've got to do some of that, and we've got to reach out to different workforces, really trying to encourage people to see this as a positive sector to work in, because it's well recognised, well rewarded, good management development opportunities, all of those things is kind of our number one priority at the moment.
It's been an ageing workforce for some time as a sector anyway, hasn't it? So yeah. Is that encouraging that younger cohort of individuals? What do you do that to try to encourage that, Jane?
We've got a great apprenticeship scheme. So I think we're up to, since our scheme started, we're up to something like 975 apprentices, and many of our early cohorts are now in team leader positions and moving through the organisation. Several of the homes during lockdown got very into TikTok, and there was some fabulous TikTok stuff going on. There was loads of just showing people that living in our services and working in our services is not like you see in the media sometimes. It is hard work as well, though. So we have to be careful we don't sell a kind of cheesy image of come and make a cup of tea and hold somebody's hand and have a nice chat. All of those things are part of what we do, but they're a part of a really demanding, intellectually demanding understanding when somebody has got capacity to make a decision or when they haven't. Really significant record keeping, being able to do all of those things and be caring and compassionate. And I'm really encouraged that some of the people calling for social care reform and support for social care loudest are the NHS, because people have seen the level of support and the skill set of the social care sector now.
From our perspective, we've seen a massive increase in people wanting to invest in the sector, who want to get involved in it. So whilst it's been a very challenging period, I think it's actually given a profile to the sector in terms of being a great place to invest capital and to meet the demands for the future. In terms of your organisation, you're going to look to develop new services?
We have a development pipeline of building new retirement housing, and we've got quite a lot of sites where we're in development at the moment. So our plan is to build just under 6,000 units. So a unit will typically be an apartment of retirement housing over the next 8 to 10 years. Broadly, we're looking at a third of them being for sale, a third for affordable rent, and a third for shared ownership. We think that we can move to a care home portfolio of 130 to 140 locations. We would look to do that by acquisition. So we have, over the last sort of 5 years, we've grown by a number of acquisitions, which have been really helpful, not just in adding scale to the organisation, but bringing good practice, bringing great people in.
Where do you think fee increases will likely to come in local authority terms? What kind of levels do you think we'll see?
Let's hope that we're seeing things in the 5 and 6%, but I'm certainly not assuming that. The pressures on local authorities, the lack of money coming through to them and the pressures that they have, then I would have thought, we'll end up at 3% or something as an average. The issue about a fair price for care, or the true cost of care, or whatever we want to call that, is one of the things that social care reform agenda has got to engage with, because until we get away from this is what I can afford to pay, and to this is what it costs to deliver a quality care service, we're always going to have this kind of confusion and uncertainty.
We touched on occupancy. You said it was improving. Where do you think occupancy will get to next year? Do you think we're going to see a return to sustainable levels for most people, or do you think it's going to take longer?
We could be back to pre-pandemic if I had the workforce to staff places. So I think I would hope that for those providers that are, delivering quality services, we should see a really strong return.
If you can't plan because you don't know where things are going, it's one of the biggest difficulties for us all, isn't it?
Pre-pandemic, I can remember waxing lyrical on panels and things about the sector needs clarity. Come on, government, get on with social care reform because the sector needs clarity. The pandemic's just really emphasised that. So it does feel as though there's a number of areas where we do need clarity to be able to turn good intent, ambition and investor interest into actually more provision that is viable for the future, so that people can have confidence they can move in somewhere and live there for as long as they want to live. People can see long-term careers in the sector, and investors can see long-term returns. When the People at the Heart of Care paper was being introduced, the Care Services Minister did actually sort of push back against a workforce plan for social care and say, this is the private sector, government shouldn't have a workforce plan. I thought, well, I don't think that's particularly helpful. Actually, perhaps we shouldn't, though, let the government kind of dictate those things. As a sector, there's things we can do together. Organisations like Skills for Care, gather data, look at things. There's a piece of work going on at the moment to look at whether we could coordinate across the sector a kind of graduate scheme into social care in the same way as other sectors have.
Being vaccinated and the issues that's caused. How have you dealt with that as an organisation, and how has that impacted?
From the very beginning, the view that we took was that we should educate and inform and support people to make their own decisions. Personally, I think the value of vaccinations for our workforce and for our organisations and for us as individuals is pivotal to getting through this. It was unhelpful that care homes were identified separately from the rest of the health and social care sector. Somebody said to me, so I can go and work in a hospital looking after somebody who's being treated for cancer, but I can't work in a care home looking after somebody with dementia. Why? And of course, the government did announce 2 days before the 11th of November, when it became compulsory in care homes, that it will be compulsory from April in all other care settings. The comment, we can't do it over the winter because of what it will do to the NHS, did strike me as somewhat ironic.
We've seen very little distress in the sector. Do you think you talked about the challenges of workforce and all the other issues that are going to impact. Do you think that's going to change in 2022, or do you think we're so steady as she goes?
It seems unlikely that we're not going to see some distress in the sector in the next 12 months. As I say, it's kind of difficult to predict. Who would have predicted we'd be where we are with workforce and with the economy, the overall employment position. And you're doing national living wage and not the true living wage. You're still talking about a 6.5% uplift in your salary costs. And if that's not reflected on the income side, then that squeeze becomes more profound. And if that's also accompanied by reinvestment in the built environment or regulatory requirements. There's a kind of Venn diagram of stuff which for some individual homes or for some groups of homes, I would have thought sitting in the middle of all three of those things. So significant workforce cost pressure, not seeing that matched by suitable uplift in terms of fee income and additional costs. We buy ahead in the energy markets. So I don't, at the moment, thankfully, have to worry about utility costs, whereas other people will have to. We are seeing food inflation as well. So, yeah, in short, I think it'd be very surprising if we don't see some distress next year.
What sort of positives do you think we can look forward to in the next year?
Kind of let's celebrate the inquiry levels and the fact that people do want to use our services. I think the fact that the vast majority of services in the sector are absolutely delivering life-changing positive services for people in later life, and families really see the benefit of that. I do think this is a sector where people can come and build careers. You know, my apprenticeship program is one of the things that really does give you faith, because you see young people who perhaps feel they haven't got a huge number of options sometimes. You know, we are trying we're trying to level up. We're trying to go to people who perhaps don't have a huge number of career options and say, come and work in this sector. And you see those people flourish and you see people move through to management positions. You have to be an optimist in order to move forward in this sector, I think. I
think from our perspective, we've seen more interest from existing operators wanting to grow their portfolios. And actually, as an organisation, we've had a really successful year in terms of the number of sales that have occurred, which has been stronger than it's probably been for the last, 4 or 5 years. So pre-pandemic, which I think shows the level of interest in investment in the sector, which has got to be positive for all of us, hasn't it?
But I do think there are ways of running our organisations more efficiently, of becoming more efficient in some of the things that we have to do that don't add value. You know, improving the quality of our electronic care planning and our medication systems, and some of the really important things that have been quite burdensome and administrative. Actually, you know, technology helping with training colleagues. We get a lot more training done. We get a lot better induction for our people, and helping people to feel part of the organisation because we can do things like this.
I think it's interesting. One of the reasons I think investors have looked at the healthcare sector is that historically they've not liked operational risk, but some of the traditional investment sectors have been usurped by the internet. You know, we all buy online. You don't need to go in an office. We're working from home. But actually delivering care, having a physical asset that people can live and work in is very important.
And perhaps we can be part of the answer to some of those sort of big fundamental questions. So, you know, what is the high street for in a post-COVID world? And what, you know, if there is a significant shift away from some of those office and commercial environments and those kind of, actually, if we've got significant demand for growth, where is the model for the high street retirement community, the high street care facility and those kind of things? There is an opportunity to be excited about some new ways of working.
Thank you, Jane. It's been really enlightening listening to you this afternoon. I really appreciate your time. And as always, your views are really, really important and valued. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. It's been fun.